He hadn't called in almost a year. Just that should have told me something. But when the phone rang that Thursday afternoon and I saw Darren on the screen, my heart jumped. I hadn't felt that in a long time, that sudden little lift in your chest before you even say, hello. He said they were throwing a small birthday party for Emily, my granddaughter, and thought it might be nice if I came. He said it so casually, like everything was normal. Like we hadn't been avoiding each other for years. He even made a joke. Said I should bring those sugar cookies I used to bake, the ones with the cracked edges and cinnamon glaze. Outside, it was raining lightly, the kind of rain that makes everything feel softer and quieter. I remember standing at the window for a full minute after we hung up, just holding the phone. I told myself, maybe this is the start of something good. Maybe time really does fix things. I thought, maybe being a mom wasn't always about losing. That night, I packed slowly. I pulled out my navy dress, the one I keep for special days, and ironed it myself. I folded in a hand-knitted scarf for Emily. Then I slipped an old photo into the lining of my purse, me and Darren, back when he still had braces and liked holding my hand in public. I didn't plan to give it to him. I just wanted it close. When you're older, getting ready for a trip feels different. You take your time. You touch every little thing, wondering how the house will feel without you in it. You close the fridge softer, water the plants slower. I didn't sleep much, but not because I was nervous. I was hopeful. It had been so long since I looked forward to something that wasn't a new soup recipe or a pharmacy discount. Friday morning, I stood by the door with my coat on, suitcase upright, checking the time, 8:13. Darren said he'd be there around 8. Funny how when you're waiting on someone you love, 5 minutes feels like forever. He pulled up just before 8:30, the music was way too loud for that early in the morning. He smiled like everything was fine. Like this was normal. And I smiled back, because that's what moms do, even when they're unsure of what's coming next, they smile. They keep going. And if you've ever packed more hope than clothes for a trip, then you know exactly how that feels. Darren stopped near the side entrance of the train station. The sky was already bright, but the air still had that quiet, early morning stillness. No honking, no people rushing around, just the soft sound of birds and a car here or there. He leaned over and popped the trunk. I got out, feeling that familiar ache in my knees. He didn't get out to help. Just sat there, fingers tapping on the steering wheel like he had somewhere better to be. I grabbed my suitcase and pulled it up onto the curb. He rolled down the window and said he'd already bought the ticket. Told me to go inside and wait, the train would be there soon. Said he needed to run a quick errand, grab some coffee, deal with something about the caterer being a mess. Then he smiled, not a big smile, not a warm one. Just a quick flicker, like a light bulb turning on and off. Before I could even say goodbye, he shifted the car into gear and drove off. No hug. No wave. No looking back. Just his taillights fading down the street. I held my suitcase closer and walked into the little station. It hadn't changed since the 70s, old vinyl seats bolted to the floor, 2 vending machines humming in the corner, and a wall clock that ticked way too loud. I went to the ticket counter and gave them my name. The woman behind the glass typed it in, frowned, and asked if I was sure someone bought it today. I nodded. She checked again. Then she said there was no ticket under that name. I opened my purse, no paper ticket. Checked my phone, no email. And my battery was down to 3%. No charger in sight. So I sat by the window with my suitcase next to me. I waited. 5 minutes. Then 10. Then 30. No message. No call. No Darren. I told myself he was just busy. Maybe something came up. Maybe the ticket would still show. Maybe there'd been a mix-up. After another hour, I stood up and walked outside, hoping maybe I'd see his car pulling back in. But the curb was empty. No silver SUV. Just a stray dog wandering across the parking lot and an older man buying a newspaper. I went back inside. The benches felt harder now. The silence was louder. I sat down, pulled my coat tighter around me, and waited some more. I kept staring at that old wall clock. The second hand moved in a smooth, steady circle, like it had all the time in the world. Not like the person who was supposed to be here. I didn't know it yet, but I wasn't going anywhere that day. I wasn't a traveler anymore. I was someone left behind. I stayed in my seat as long as I could, trying to look calm, trying to believe maybe he'd still show up. After another hour passed, I stood up and started pacing around the little terminal. The woman behind the glass gave me a quick glance, then looked away. She didn't ask anything. Nobody did. I was just another older woman waiting for something they couldn't see or understand. I tried Darren's number again. This time, it rang once, then went straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. My throat felt tight and my voice didn't feel steady. I didn't trust what would come out. I stepped outside. The sky had changed, darker now, with heavy clouds starting to gather in the distance. I looked around the parking lot one more time. I even checked around the back of the building, like maybe Darren was hiding somewhere, just waiting to surprise me. But he wasn't. His car wasn't there. There was no sign of him at all. I walked to the curb, hoping maybe I'd spot a cab or a rideshare. I pulled out my phone, but the screen was black, battery dead. I had no charger, no backup, just me and the wind picking up a little more now. A woman walked by, someone who looked kind. I asked gently if I could borrow her phone for one quick call. She hesitated for a second but handed it over. I dialed Darren again. One ring, then a fast click. He declined it. I handed the phone back, thanked her. She didn't say anything, just gave a small nod and kept walking. Back inside, everything felt harder. The bench, the air, even my coat on my shoulders. I opened my purse and checked every pocket, even the little zipper at the bottom. I found a $10 bill folded beside some tissues. That was it. I hadn't packed money, I wasn't supposed to be traveling alone. I looked around the room. A young man with headphones on. A tired mom with 2 sleeping kids on her lap. No one looked at me. That hurt more than if they had. At least then I'd exist for someone. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, still and small. The clock kept ticking. That same steady second hand. Like nothing had changed. Then, a soft voice broke the quiet. You look like you could use something warm. I looked up. An older woman, probably around my age, stood there, holding a to-go cup. She wore a denim jacket with the collar a little frayed, and her eyes were gentle and kind. She said her name was Ruthie. Told me she owned a small bookshop right across the street. Said it wasn't fancy, just shelves of old paperbacks and bad coffee, but it was warm. Said I could sit for a while if I wanted. No pressure. I nodded. I didn't have the heart to say no. We crossed the street slowly. My suitcase wheels kept catching on the sidewalk cracks. Ruthie noticed and slowed her steps to match mine. She didn't ask questions. Didn't fill the air with chit-chat. She just walked with me like a quiet friend. Inside, the shop felt like stepping into a soft, forgotten corner of the world. The air smelled like old pages and something toasted, maybe overbrewed tea, maybe just time itself. It wasn't sweet, but it was comforting. The kind of quiet that doesn't hurt. It just wraps around you and lets you breathe. Ruthie pointed to a worn-out armchair by the window. I sat down, coat still on, purse in my lap. I didn't say anything. I wasn't ready to. She didn't push. Behind the counter, Ruthie moved slowly but steady, pulled down 2 chipped mugs, clicked on a little kettle. Her hands didn't shake. They were just older. Like mine. Lived in. Sure of themselves. I sank deeper into the armchair. It was the kind of seat that made your spine give up and rest. For the first time all day, I stopped pretending I was okay. She brought me a cup of tea. No words, no awkward questions. Just the quiet kindness of someone who knew what it meant to be left behind. We sat like that for a while. I watched cars roll by. A group of teenagers passed the window, laughing loudly about something that had nothing to do with me. Their joy felt like it belonged in a different world. A world I used to be part of. The tea was bitter. Not terrible, just the kind of bitter you grow to like if you give it time. Eventually, Ruthie spoke. Told me she'd been running the shop for almost 30 years. Said people didn't read like they used to, but she kept it open anyway. Said books grounded her, gave her something solid to hold on to. I nodded. I understood that. You can measure a whole life by the stories you carry. She never asked my name. Never asked why I was sitting in her shop with tear-dry eyes and a coat still on. She just talked around the silence like it was someone she'd met before. She told me she'd once been left at a bus station in Tulsa. Said it wasn't just about being forgotten, it was about feeling invisible. I didn't say anything. But I understood that too. I looked down at my hands. They weren't shaking, but they were clenched tight around the mug. My fingers pressed so close together, it almost hurt. I hadn't cried, not at the station, not when Darren drove off. But there, in that quiet little bookshop, with the floor gently creaking under Ruthie's steps, something inside me started to give way. Ruthie walked over to a shelf, pulled down a book, and set it beside me. She didn't push. Just said I could read it, or just hold it if I wanted. Sometimes, she said, the weight of a story helps more than the story itself. The book cover was old and worn. You could barely read the title. But the spine was still strong, still holding together. I didn't open it. I just let it sit there in my lap. That small, solid thing. Something that hadn't left me behind. By late afternoon, the sky outside had turned a deep gray. Ruthie handed me a blanket and said I could stay as long as I needed. No rush. No closing time. So I stayed. That night, I slept in a bookshop. still wearing my coat, an unopened book in my lap, and a half-full cup of cold tea on the table beside me. And somehow, in that small, dusty space, I felt safer than I had in a very long time. The next morning, I woke to the sound of pages turning. Ruthie was already up, sitting at the counter with her glasses slipping low on her nose, reading something thick and old. The shop felt warmer, or maybe I just did. She made oatmeal on a tiny hot plate tucked behind the register, no sugar, no milk. Just plain oats and a few raisins. I ate slowly, one bite at a time, letting the warmth spread through my chest like a soft fire. When I finished, she handed me a clean dish towel and nodded toward the sink. That was her way of saying, thank you, and I got it. I washed the bowl, dried it, and put it back where she had pulled it from. By noon, I told her I needed to head home. She didn't ask where that was. Just handed me a small paper bag with 2 granola bars, a bottle of water, and a folded umbrella. I've got a feeling the sky's not done yet, she said with a soft smile. And she was right. Halfway through the bus ride, the clouds opened up again. Rain tapped the windows like little fingers, steady and knowing, like it was trying to remind me of something. I sat near the back, my suitcase tucked between my feet, water starting to gather under the wheels. When I finally got home, everything felt heavier. I peeled off my wet coat, set my suitcase by the door, and went straight to the bedroom closet. In the corner sat the old filing cabinet, stuck a little from the humidity, like always. I gave it a hard tug. Inside, in the middle folder, were the papers Darren probably hoped I had forgotten about. The trust account. The one my husband set up years ago, before his first surgery. It was supposed to go to Darren and Emily eventually, but I was still the one in charge. Still the trustee. I pulled the folder out and sat at the dining table, flipping through the pages. The rules were clear. No money could be released without my written approval. There was even a clause about mental capacity. My husband had insisted on it after watching his own mother get taken advantage of. If someone claimed I was losing it, there had to be real proof. From a real doctor. And I knew then, Darren had tried something. I had felt it building for months. The way he talked to me, slow and sugary, like I was a child. The way he double-checked everything I said. How he offered to take over my mail, my appointments, always with that polite tone that somehow felt like an insult. At the very back of the folder was an envelope. Inside was a letter from the bank. Darren had requested to start taking money from the trust. He'd even included a letter, supposedly signed by me, giving permission. But the signature wasn't mine. I stared at it for a long time. The loops were off. The slant too sharp. He had copied it, probably from one of those birthday cards I used to send Emily. Thought I wouldn't notice. Thought I wouldn't check. But I did. I placed the papers back into a clean envelope and set it aside on the table. He thought I was slipping. But I remembered everything, especially this. The next morning, I picked up the old landline in the kitchen and called Kendrick. He answered on the second ring. His voice was still the same, deep, steady, calm. The kind of voice that came from years of reading contracts and catching other people's lies. I need to come in, I said. He didn't ask why. Just gave me a time. The rain had stopped, but the streets still looked wet. The sidewalks shimmered like someone had poured clear paint over everything. Kendrick's office was in the same quiet brick building, tucked between a post office and a law library. I hadn't been there since my husband's funeral. Before I could even knock, Kendrick opened the door. Gave me a small nod. I stepped in, and he offered me the same brown leather chair I used to sit in when we first signed the trust papers. It squeaked when I leaned back. I reached into my bag, pulled out the envelope, and slid the forged letter across his desk. He looked at the paper on his desk but didn't pick it up right away. Just stared at it, then looked at me. You remember what we added to the original documents? He asked. I nodded. Every word. He opened a drawer, pulled out a red folder with my husband's initials on it, and inside was an envelope I'd never seen before. Kendrick opened it, unfolded the papers, and showed me something my husband had quietly signed 6 months before. He passed. It was a rule added to the trust, a strict one. It said that if anyone tried to lie, push, or trick the trustee, the trust would be frozen right away. No money. No access. And no second chance unless 2 legal advisors both agreed to reinstate the person, but both of those men had passed away. Kendrick placed the paper in front of me and tapped it with his finger. This gives us the power to act. We just need your signature and what you already brought. I had the letter. That was enough. He handed me a pen, and I signed. Then, he calmly called the bank. His voice didn't rise or fall, just steady. He quoted the clause, gave them my name as the acting trustee, and by the time he hung up, the account was frozen. Darren wouldn't even know until they reviewed everything. I leaned back and stared at the painting on Kendrick's wall, gold. Leaves, a quiet path leading into the blur of a forest. My husband had loved it. Said it reminded him of the woods from his childhood. I'd always found it unsettling. Too quiet. Too uncertain. But that day, I understood it a little more. Kendrick put the folder back, locked the drawer, and walked me to the door. He gently placed a hand on my shoulder and waited. I finally let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked out. And for the first time in weeks, my steps felt like mine again. When I got home, I didn't even take off my shoes. I went straight to the kitchen, pulled out the envelope Kendrick gave me, and laid it beside my notepad. The trust was frozen, yes, but that wasn't enough for me. I turned on my old desk lamp and started writing a letter. Not to Darren. I was done with that. I wrote to the office of the Inspector General. I included everything: the forged signature, the fake claims, the pressure to give legal permission. I wrote names, dates, banks, no emotion, just facts. I added copies of the documents and Kendrick's signed statement. Then I signed it in blue ink, sealed it, and slipped it into my purse. The post office was only 4 blocks away. The evening air was cold and still, the kind that wakes you up better than coffee ever could. I mailed the letter, got a receipt, and watched the clerk toss it into the bin like it wasn't holding the weight of everything falling apart. I didn't flinch. I just turned and walked out. Back home, I pulled out my checkbook, hadn't used it in months. I sat down and began writing small checks. One to my retirement fund I'd let lapse. One to the heating company, paying ahead for winter. One to a local literacy group I used to help out with, back before Darren told me I was too tired to keep volunteering. Each check felt like a quiet win. Not revenge, just getting my life back, piece by piece. 2 days later, Kendrick called. Darren had finally reached out, demanding answers. Kendrick told him the truth. The trust was locked. The papers were being reviewed. No access. No payout. No more quiet stealing. Darren didn't call me. He didn't even leave a voicemail. But I knew he heard the message. The silence said enough. Later that week, I went to the bank myself. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I looked the teller in the eye and asked her to confirm who had control of the trust. She checked her screen, then looked up at me and nodded. "It's still you," she said. I walked out with the confirmation slip tucked inside my coat pocket. Just a piece of paper, but I held onto it the whole way home like it might slip away if I didn't. That night, I made tea and sat in the quiet kitchen with only the stove light on. Outside, the street was still. Inside, I didn't feel tight in my chest anymore. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't made a scene. But he no longer had his hands on what he thought was already his. And I had taken back what was always mine. Late Wednesday morning, I was folding towels on the couch when the apartment intercom buzzed. It startled me more than it should have. I wiped my hands and pressed the button. It was a delivery man. He had a large envelope from a courier service. There was no return address, just my name typed neatly on the label. I signed for it without asking questions and brought it inside. Deep down, I already knew what it was. Inside the envelope was a copy of a letter Darren had sent to the Legal Review Board. It was long, defensive, and full of excuses. He blamed everything on misunderstandings and miscommunication, saying I'd forgotten conversations or mixed up timelines. He didn't say sorry. Not once. He didn't mention the forged letter either. Instead, he tried to make himself look like a caring son just trying to help. There was another paper too, an affidavit signed by a family doctor I hadn't seen in 3 years. The date had been changed, and the note was vague. It didn't say I was unfit or incompetent. Just mentioned stress, aging, and forgetfulness. Words that could mean anything if twisted the right way. I set the papers aside. My hands didn't shake. I'd already learned what it felt like to be quietly pushed out of my own life. But what stuck with me most wasn't that letter, it was what happened later that afternoon. I had stepped out to grab a few groceries, milk, bread, some apples. When I came back, I noticed the voicemail light blinking. 2 messages. The first was from the clinic, just confirming my upcoming checkup. The second one, that was from Emily. Her voice was soft, more careful than I remembered. She said she had heard some things and wasn't sure what was really going on, but just wanted to say hi. That was it, just hi. She didn't leave a number or say where she was. She only mentioned missing the cookies I used to bake. And then she hung up. It didn't sound like a message someone plans to leave. It sounded like something whispered when nobody else is around. I sat down at the kitchen table, still holding the grocery bag, and listened to her voice again. Twice. Then I deleted it, not because I was angry, but because I understood. She wasn't really calling me. She was reaching out to the version of me that had been pushed away, made distant. She didn't know the full truth yet. But she was starting to notice the cracks. I finished putting the groceries away, apples in the bowl, bread in the drawer, milk in the fridge. The world hadn't stopped. But something had shifted. Not loudly, just a quiet change, the kind you only feel when everything goes too still. And in that stillness, I realized something important: Darren wasn't in control anymore. He just didn't know it yet. Kendrick was the one who suggested we meet again. He said there was something I needed to hear, something he didn't want to say over the phone. We met at a little diner off Union Street. The kind with old booths and waitresses who never write anything down. I got there early and sat where I could see the door. He walked in 10 minutes later, looking tired, holding a manila folder. No small talk. Just coffee, black. Then he placed the folder on the table and opened it. Inside were printed emails, dozens. Most were from Darren. A few were from someone at the bank. One was from a lawyer I'd never heard of. They were all about the same thing: access, control, strategy. Kendrick pointed to one message in particular. It was dated 2 weeks before. I got that phone call about Emily's party. In it, Darren had laid out a plan to manage me. Nothing direct, just slick, careful language, words like compliance, transition, streamlining. That party. The timing. Even the train ride. It wasn't chance. It was all part of the plan. I didn't say anything. Just read. Then closed the folder. My hands rested on it. They felt heavy, not from shock, but from finally seeing things clearly. I asked Kendrick what would happen next. He said the bank had finished its review. The signatures didn't match. Darren's attempt to access the money had been recorded. Legally, nothing more would happen unless I decided to file a formal complaint. I didn't answer. Just nodded. Then he told me something else: a second bank had contacted him. Darren had tried to move assets using his own firm's information. That attempt had been flagged. I let those words settle deep inside. They didn't hit me like a betrayal anymore. They just confirmed what I already knew. I think deep down, I had always known. I just hadn't seen every sharp edge of it until now. Kendrick and I sat in silence while the waitress topped off our coffee. After a while, he stood up, handed me the folder, and told me to take my time. "There's no rush," he said. "No deadline. Just the truth, waiting for you whenever you're ready." I walked home with the folder tucked under my coat, held close to my chest. The air outside had turned colder, but I didn't mind. When I got home, I placed the folder on the counter but didn't open it again. Not yet. I stood there for a moment, coat still on, just staring out the window as the daylight started to slip away. He had made every move like someone sure no one was paying attention, but I had seen enough now. And in my hands, I held the one piece he'd forgotten I still had. The knock came a little after 6. Not loud, just 3 soft taps, like someone unsure if they should even be there. I sat on the couch, lights off except for the one over the sink. I looked through the peephole. It was Darren. His suit jacket was a little wrinkled. He had his phone in one hand and stood straight like he was about to give a business pitch. I didn't open the door. I just watched, letting the quiet settle in the space between us. He knocked again, this time a little softer. Then he waited. I didn't move. After a moment, I heard him sigh. He shifted his weight, then reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. He bent down and slid it under the door. Then, nothing. No goodbye. No footsteps walking away. Just silence. I waited 10 minutes before picking it up. Inside was a letter, handwritten, spaced carefully, like he'd really taken his time. The kind of letter someone writes when they feel like they've run out of chances. He admitted he had made some mistakes, said he had overstepped. Claimed he was trying to protect me, from confusion, from stress, from handling too much. But he never admitted what he actually did. His words danced around it, clean and polite. He asked to meet, said we should talk, clear the air. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. Then I slid it into the drawer beside my keys. I didn't plan to respond. The next morning, I walked to the notary's office. Kendrick had already prepared everything: full removal of Darren's access to the trust, change of the secondary beneficiary, and Emily's name taken off for now. Kendrick told me it could be reversed later, if I ever changed my mind. I signed every page carefully. My initials were steady, clear in the margins. The notary stamped the final form and handed me my copy. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like a clean ending. On the way home, I passed a bench where I used to sit with Emily when she was little. We'd feed ducks there and count the yellow leaves in the fall. I didn't stop this time. I just kept walking, eyes forward. Back at home, the apartment felt different. Not changed, just clearer. Like something heavy had been swept out. That evening, I made a small pot of soup, just lentils, carrots, and a little rosemary from the plant on the windowsill. I ate alone at the kitchen table. Nothing fancy. I didn't check the mailbox. Didn't look at my phone. Some things just didn't need checking anymore. That night, I slept straight through. No tossing, no strange dreams, no waking up in the dark wondering what I'd missed. Just sleep. Quiet and deep. He had come to see me, but I didn't need to be seen anymore. He'd already taught me everything I needed to know. By walking away, he gave me room to come back to myself. The next morning was gray, but not heavy. Just calm. The kind of morning that makes you feel sure about your choices. I got dressed. With care, slacks, a blouse I hadn't worn in ages, and a simple pearl necklace my husband gave me for our 30th anniversary. It rested on my collarbone like a soft reminder. No pain. Just memory. I took the bus to the bank, same one Darren used, same counters he once leaned on with fake smiles. I walked in and asked to speak with the senior associate. She came out. Quickly, smiling kindly, and led me to a small office with frosted glass. She had already reviewed everything Kendrick sent. It was all in order. No questions, just confirmations. I handed over the final documents, closure of our joint access. And the trust, finally, placed back where it belonged. I moved everything into my name, every account, every dollar. I took off all the other names from the investment account. When the bank lady asked if I wanted to set up any alerts or messages, I shook my head. No warnings, no reminders, just a clean, final break. She stamped the last page, handed me a folder with my new account details, and thanked me for coming in person. As I walked out, I passed by the teller counter. A young guy behind the glass gave me a polite smile. I smiled back. He reminded me of a boy Darren used to coach in Little League, same hopeful face, same straight posture. But this one hadn't learned how to fake things yet. Outside, the wind had picked up. I pulled my coat tight and held the folder close to my chest. I stopped at the bakery on the corner and bought a single apple tart, still warm from the oven. The woman behind the counter wrapped it gently and slipped in a napkin without me asking. I thanked her and took the long way home. I ate the tart. At the kitchen table, watching the breeze play with the leaves outside the window. The flavor was simple, just sweet enough. The crust fell apart softly with every bite. I didn't rush. Later that afternoon, I opened a new bank account at a place Darren didn't know. Emily had never stepped foot in it either. It wasn't to hide anything. It just felt like drawing a new line, starting from where I stood now, not where they left me. That evening, I poured myself a cold glass of water and stood at the sink, watching cars roll by outside. Traffic lights blinked, people passed, and life kept going. He had made his choices, but the final decision had always been mine. And now, there was nothing left for him to take, only what I decided to keep. A week went by. No calls. No letters. No surprise visitors. Just quiet, the kind that doesn't echo, just settles in like it belongs. I went back to the bookshop. Ruthie was there, like always, and gave me a soft nod. She didn't ask questions. Didn't bring up the day I arrived with nothing but a suitcase and a trembling voice. She handed me a cup of tea, the same bitter kind. I didn't mind it anymore. I'd gotten used to it. I sat in the same chair by the window, but this time, I brought my own book, one I used to love but had forgotten in all the noise. I read slowly, page by page, like I was reconnecting with a piece of myself I'd left behind. On the way home, I stopped at the market and bought fresh basil, tomatoes, and a small block of cheese. I hadn't made a real meal in a long time. That night, I cooked. Not for anyone else. Just for me. The kitchen smelled like something brand new was starting, even if I didn't have a name for it yet. Before bed, I opened the windows and let the cold night air in. It felt fresh, like it was blowing away the last traces of him. The house didn't feel empty. It felt like it was mine again. I took the old letter he had written me, the one he slid under the door, and tucked it in the back of a drawer. Not because I wanted to hold on to it, but as a quiet reminder of how far I'd come. Not everything needs to be burned. Some things just need to be put away. The next morning, I walked through the neighborhood. The air was cool, and the sunlight was soft. I passed the same train station where he left me, but this time, I didn't stop. I just kept walking. And I didn't look back. If this story reminds you of a time you had to take back your strength, even without saying a word, I want you to know, you're not alone. Sometimes, the quietest winds shape us the most. If you've ever felt invisible, I see you. And if you've ever walked away without needing anyone to clap for you, that quiet strength deserves to be honored. If this story touched something deep in you, feel free to leave a comment, or just a small heart. That's more than enough.